Hi Jane, I'm so excited to have you joining us for our training today. We're going to be talking about showing up as the best person for our horse, connecting with our emotions when we're working with our horse and not just being in our training brain, and developing our relaxation skills with our horses. So before we dig too deeply into that, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Okay, hi, I'm Jane, and I am an aromatherapist for both people and animals. I'm also an animal communicator, but my main focus is to help improve the bonds and the connections on not just a physical level, but on an emotional level with our horses or our dogs as well, because it works with any animal that we have, including cats. But that is like my main focus. And with that comes a sense of having to be within your body and your feelings and learning how to manage those feelings so that they don't overrun. But they do at times, and it happens with all of us. And we just have to take a step back and feel into what we're feeling, and if it's us or if it's something else that's from outside of us, and then work with ourselves. It's all about growing ourselves as much as it is about improving our horses. So for me, a horse is like another person who teaches us more about ourselves so that we can grow and expand and become a better version of who we are.
And they're typically the only ones that can tell us we're not doing a good enough job, right?
Yeah, pretty much. They will tell us if we're doing an absolutely poop job at something and if we need to improve who we are and what we're doing. Like, I know with mine that if I was doing something where it wasn't in my integrity as far as they were concerned, or within their scope of what my integrity should be,
Yeah.
very much would be a stomp on the ground with a hoof and this look if to say, hands on hip, what the hell are you doing? You're not doing that right. Until you can treat me with respect, come back later.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. And it's having a relationship with your horse or your dog or your cat. You're not just, listen to me, I'm the boss here. You have to do what I say. I mean, I have a disability, and my horses and my dogs, they knew and know when there is an issue that I need them to step up and be the leaders. So my mare Kellyanne was always my protector, my guide. And if she thought I was in danger, she was like a mare with a foal, and she would wrap her head around me and pick me up and carry me away. So it's a relationship, it's a two-way street. You wouldn't have your partner and turn and say, look, you've got to do this now or else, because they would tell you just to shut up and get lost, sort of thing. But that's it's just like any relationship that we have, and we have to work on that relationship, and with relationships we have to work on ourselves,
Yeah, definitely.
which you talk a lot about.
I do. Because Fiddy and King have been really good at telling me to work on myself. And as always, you get to see the full brunt of my disappointment in myself and just like general, nothing is working. Oh, hi Pam, how you going? And you get to be the one that tries and guide me through my frustration when things aren't working well with the horses. And it's not to do with lack of tools and lack of ability to train, lack of ability to work with the horse. Like, I've got all of those and I can make a horse do what I need it to do. But when it comes to, your horse human relationship, there's more than just that when you're working with the horses. And that's not often talked about because for a lot of trainers that are seeing, lots of different horses, they only have them for a really short period of time. And they have, like, the expectations are there to turn out well trained horses. Taking in our horses' emotional state means that we have to take it significantly slower than what trainers can. And so the ones that are really good at emotionally disconnecting, shutting down, not being engaged in training and just figuring it out and coping, they turn out with really good training. But it's not until you get them home and they start unpacking all of these emotions that they had in response to the training that you start to see there's a lot more to training than just teaching the aids and the cues and whatnot.
Exactly. I agree. You know that. So, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I think is really difficult in the industry because, you know, everybody that has a platform that's talking about how to train horses are trainers. And so they often don't have the opportunity to work on that like emotional spectrum of what the horse needs from us to support them through the training process. And so the emotions they do see are the dangerous ones. They're the ones that, you know, the horses have really escalated the behavior because they're just really not coping anymore, or they might be the temperament like my horse that doesn't cope with just being told what to do. And so escalates really quick in that situation. If you go in there in a working brain, you're like, you will do as you're told. So being able to come into that training environment, we've talked a lot about the differences with the lessons learnt between my horses. I guess what we should start with a little bit is where our baseline is with relaxation.
Relaxation can be a tricky thing to work with. It's not hard, but you have to understand what it is that puts you on edge, what triggers you to become stressed or tense and need to relax. When you can identify that, that can help you with the tools that you need to help support your level of relaxation. And you also have to remember that there will be a knock-on effect between you and your horse. And there are also times when the horses actually, as you were just saying, that they unpack their emotions when they get home because they're trying to process as well. Horses have a larger emotional cortex than what humans do. You know, that's why there's the fight and flight thing so strong with them. But what you need to understand is, why are you stressed? Why do you get tense? What is it? For me, when my tension comes from when I'm going to horses, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I'm going to be near a horse, I'm going to get to ride. And I'm still like that. I think mum and dad and I were talking a few weeks back, and I was like 16 months old the first time that I asked for a horse, you know, and all I've ever think, and for me, even like everyone says about cuddling dogs, I mean, I used to run up and cuddle a strange dog I didn't know, or dogs will run and cuddle me, you know. So for me, it's that enthusiastic excitement, which doesn't seem to go bad when you're working with them. But if you're going to the paddock and you're someone who's had a serious major fall and you love to ride, but you're scared, so you have to work on that fear aspect. If you haven't had a fall, but you're afraid of falling off, that's a fear and a confidence aspect that you need to work on. So that working on those factors will help you to relax more, and understanding why you have that issue will help you even further, and you will grow and expand. It's not going to go away completely. I have a fear of cars because I was in a bad motor accident. Don't worry about falling off the horse, considering I couldn't walk for a long time and was told I'd never walk again and I'd never ride a horse again. Not scared about getting on a horse, but getting in a car at times for me can be absolutely terrifying. And I have to sit down and go through the process of that for myself. You know, what's scaring me, what's the issue. If we're in a lot of traffic, then I have to practice my breathing, and then I have to work on my confidence. And aromatherapy comes in really well to help us find that level of relaxation, find that level of release as well. If we're willing to work with aromatherapy on a level, it will help us to release certain aspects of what our triggers are. And when we understand those triggers and unpack them ourselves, we can actually move forward further and grow and expand more. This is the same principle, though, when you have a horse like King, who was severely traumatized when he was younger before you got him. You know, he had so much, angst. We're using the word angst, but that was because he went through some really nasty things physically. And he needed to find someone who, at that moment in time, was ready to detach and could work detached from him, but give him the space, the room, and the courage to try and heal some of what he'd been through. And with you and King, we made an oil to help support both of you. Remember?
Yeah.
And
yep, that was amazing.
And how did that go?
It was pretty good. So maybe in a sec we should touch on how the aromatherapy works, but the essential oils that Jane made up for me and King, that was the main experience that I remember was going to a really devastating funeral for one of our young students. Oh my God, I think we're going to cry a lot in
Oh, that's okay. We can cry together.
We're going to cry a lot in this. We're going to do some emotional unpacking ourselves.
Yes.
I think I might need to go and find that essential oil so we can get through this together.
I've got my hair one there that grounds me really well and helps my hair be nice and healthy. So I'll just like reach over and grab that. Oh, lost volume, Katie.
One of our young students commit suicide. She was only 13, and it was just a horrible experience. And I had your essential oils then, and I was rolling them on at the funeral, and it helped me to find like this really lovely place of calm and center, and not just be completely flooded and overwhelmed emotionally, so that I couldn't be there in that experience for our other students that were her friends and her age and didn't necessarily understand the experience so well. So it was definitely a really like obvious emotional response to the oils, where I could just like get through that process. And it wasn't like a shove it all down and not feel anything. It was like it's okay.
Slow release.
Sorry?
A slow release. A slow release.
Yeah, so that you're not just like completely overwhelmed so you can't function.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, continue.
No go.
Yeah, so for working with King, him and I would roll it on myself, and I think I was rolling it on him as well. Or it might have mostly been just rolling it on myself and being with him with the essential oils, just to help him find that emotional center around me as well, and help him to kind of work through because even I didn't have any of the training tools that we have now in training trainability. I just had my best efforts, which for a lot of us, that's all we have, is like just doing the best that you can. And so even towards the end of having King, he you had to be really particular about how you approached him. You had to approach him on the left. You had to approach really slowly. You had to show that you were paying attention to his body language. He had to be standing under his tree. He had to hold the halter out so he could put his own halter on. And if you didn't do that perfectly, he would run away. So even towards the end, like, he still had that emotional trauma from his youth, but we kind of had a way of understanding how to work with each other so that he could still feel safe and confident. The really fun thing about him is that he got to a point where he understood how to look after beginners. So if you were a complete beginner, you could go out and catch him with the halter backwards. you didn't have to be perfect in your approach if you're a beginner. He knew what to do. But if it was me, I had to do it to the T. Otherwise, I wouldn't catch him.
And a lot of that would be because he had somebody who didn't understand and was probably approaching him with more kind of more of an excited, uncertain level as to where, like, okay, me, I'm like a 5-year-old so go, oh my god, but unless they start playing silly bugs, and I'm like, fine then, but with us, every one of us horse people or ladies, whoever our audience is, we I call it dropping into neutral. So for me, I drop into my heart space when I'm approaching a horse. Even horses I don't know, first place I go is straight in my heart space, and animals love that and they're really curious about it. So if you've actually, like the grounding meditations that I have shared, when you're grounding, you notice the horses all just sort of like step back. But the moment you come into your heart space, they'll come forward and go, ooh, I like that. And that for me is dropping into neutral. For you, dropping into neutral is dropping everything and just being in your body and present. That's it.
Yeah.
Especially with King, because that was what he needed.
Yeah.
And so what you needed at the time.
It's also what I needed at the time. So let's talk a little bit about that. So this is definitely a hard place. Sorry, I also have a cold at the moment, which is why I sound super nasally. But this
That's
dropping
okay.
into neutral, I think, is probably the hardest place for a lot of us to find, and a place that without practice, you kind of don't really understand that you're there until you get there. So it's where you're empty of thoughts and you're somewhat empty of emotion. is my detached version of it. And King taught me. And then our place that Fiddy's been working on with me is being in that experience of what does it look and feel like for me to express love.
So for each of us, our neutral place is different. A thought that came to me just a second ago was the different parts of our body where each person finds their neutral space. So if you find it in your heart center, right, this is a place of unconditional, compassionate love, and it's a neutral thing. It's like, I love you, therefore you have to do X, Y, Z, right? But if you think your neutral is in your solar plex area, this is a form of power. And if you have ever noticed some people who approach horses, like I call it 10 men, when they're like, oh, I'm good at this sort of thing, and they're not, but they're like in their neutral, but they're in their solar plex area and they're like overconfident. It's not a real confidence, it's an overconfidence. Every one of my horses, especially my Shelley, used to stand there and she was like 16, one hand's high, her point of shoulder come up to above my shoulder blade. Right? She would stand there and she would eye someone who did that. She'd go, my hoof is bigger than your head. Let's see who's going to win this battle.
Yeah.
And it's where you find your neutral. With animals, most of the time, I have noticed, even if they've been through severe trauma, if you can go into your heart space, and sometimes then you've got to drop that away as well, because sometimes they don't understand that. They know that what you're coming towards, the energy you're using, isn't because horses read our energy, they just don't read our body language. But they're like, okay, but I don't quite understand what you mean by that. If you watch a veterinarian, and I'm talking about good veterinarians, and I've spent a lot of time with vets, as you know, if you watch a really good veterinarian, they will walk to the horse with a level of examination, curiosity, and they're not exactly in their heart space, but a good vet is in the love of the horse or the love of the animal that they're working with. And this gives them a different level of neutral as well, because they've got to be in their, because being veterinarians, they've got to be in their headspace more in their mental body.
Yeah.
So their level of neutral is different from an owner's, but it's one that gives them the opportunity to assess what's going on with a level of emotional detachment, you know?
Yeah.
And that is the sort of space that some people, for horses who have been through trauma, you need to be in, which is probably more of a space that you're able to come from when it came to King.
Yeah.
You know, so
you can't bring the happy vibes to King. There was still too many vibes.
yeah, you had to be in that space where you were in work mode, where
Yeah.
I have a task to do, and that energy told King then what was expected of him at that moment in time.
Yeah.
So if you could understand where he was like, "You're approaching me this way. I don't know what you're wanting, Katie. I think you need to back off. I'm going to back away right now until you tell me what it is you want." And that would be his reaction. As to where a novice who would come up to him and go, "Oh my God, you're such a pretty horsey," he'd be like, that's kind of cute. Do you have any clue? Let's see how much clue you have. And that would
Yeah.
give him a different level to look at, because the person wasn't approaching him with a list of things to do, as to where the people who had him before, they have things that they wanted to do. And it wasn't conducive to who he was.
Yeah.
You know, so you had to have that list of things that you were looking for at the time, which helped you to be emotionally detached, but mentally telling him what you wanted.
Yeah. So this place that we're talking about with, like, finding where your neutral is, if you have a look in the guide section of the Facebook group, we do have a couple of getting quiet and still trainings in there, but it can be a really difficult place for us to be. I know that for a lot of our members, they this is the one that they struggle with, is being relaxed and getting our horses breathing with us. Excuse me, sorry. And part of that problem is us. Because we also bring our own emotional baggage into the relationship. And that place of quiet is really, really uncomfortable if you haven't done it before. And if you are going to practice this and stuff does come up for you, we do strongly recommend that you seek out support to guide you through this process. Because the first time that I went through this process, I didn't have anyone guiding me, and I was just taking information from books and the internet and different things. And it was not the best way to do it because
No,
I
because you're
was
all individuals.
very scattered, and I wasn't, really, it's hard to explain, but I really lost touch with reality through the process, because there's also an unpacking of your belief system that goes hand in hand with it. So an example of this is if you get told something and it hits you really heavy and it becomes part of your belief system, it might not be true, but you take it with you through the rest of your life, and subconsciously you're responding to your environment with this underlying belief process. And so that's part of this unpacking process, is that finding these beliefs that aren't necessarily your truth and changing them to fit your truth better, and then the emotions that are attached to that belief pattern that that kind of sunk in too deep, as like a younger person, or it can happen to us as adults as well. Like an example of this could be something as minute as like a teacher in childhood telling you you're not smart. And if that hits you and you believe that, then you go through your whole existence thinking that you're not smart, whereas you might have just needed a different way to learn than what gets showed to you at school. And so then you have all of these emotions of confidence and lack of self-worth and all these other emotions that come along that stick to that belief. And then each experience that you go into from there, you go into it thinking, I'm not smart, feeling poor about yourself, lacking self-worth, lacking confidence. And so then you don't do well. And so that reinforces the fact that you're not smart. And then that creates a whole new set of emotions that tie into that experience. And then that like becomes your existence. And so the process of like unpacking these emotions and these beliefs, excuse me, is really difficult. Is really difficult because you have to feel into those emotions to find where that belief is. So feeling into those emotions are really difficult because you feel into those experiences that hit you really hard that created those emotions. Jane, do you want to take over? Because I'm going to have a coughing fit.
Well, yes, and that's what happens when you start to unpack and you start to go into yourself more. You start to find all these little things that, oh my God, I worked through that. I don't have that issue now. As Katie was saying, not being smart enough or things like that. That actually happened to me. And when I got to high school, I was told I was too dumb to bother to go to high school. And then I ended up being a straight A student because I had two teachers who believed in me and taught me to believe in myself. So it's where you need to learn that level of self-belief as well when you're unpacking stuff. But the emotions that do come up are very uncomfortable. And the best way to put it is it teaches you more about yourself where you're going to grow, and you find that those things are generally a projection of how the other person feels about themselves. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like such a cliche because there are so many things. Like if you say to me, what is meant to be will be, I'm like, oh, for crying out loud, people only use that when something bad happens, you know? But yeah. when people say things about you, it's usually what they think about themselves that they want to put on you.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
When you're feeling into them, and it depends on what kind of emotions come up. So when I started going back into my heart space after a traumatic relationship, which tends to be a major catalyst for those of us who shut down or have shut down in the past, you actually go through those emotions again. And it helps you to find a new aspect of yourself. Now, this also depends on where your level of neutral lies, which, as Katie was explaining, is what you have been through childhood, because that is where it starts, basically, without going too esoteric on everybody. But that is it. So to find a place that is your neutral, you don't have to be a meditator, because trust me, meditation was not a thing that I could do for very, very long at all. Now I can meditate and journey for hours. But a simple thing that some people can try who aren't meditators, okay? You can either do this with your dog, your cat, or your horse, so it doesn't matter. But animals are naturally, especially those who have had a solid foundation. So as Katie would know, Trin taught her this, and probably doesn't even realize Trin taught her this. But if you go and you just take some deep breaths, and if you want to, you can close your eyes. So if you just like breathe in, and usually when you start to do that sort of thing, first thing you want to do is take some really good deep breaths and just them out. And you'll notice that when you do that, you'll find that things start to loosen off and shake off in your energy. So you can do this partway through it. But as you can hear, that's my Zane barking in the background. And I do this with every new horse I meet, which probably makes me a little bit weird and eccentric. But what I do is I breathe in and I find my space because I'm used to it. And even if it's hard to feel that space because of the feelings, place your palms, because our hands and the soles of our feet take in more energy. We actually have energy centers in our hands that share energy. An animal will happily share their energy with you if you are in a space of calmness or trying to get your calmness, because if you're not, an animal will offer you theirs.
Yeah.
They're not a selfish creature, and their energetic field, because we're all energy, is much higher than ours. So if you take a few breaths and you place your hands on any part of the horse you feel comfortable with, the shoulder, the neck, the forehead, and you just stand there for a moment and close your eyes and just breathe in and out. And as you're breathing in and out, whatever cares come up, whatever noise is in your head, just let it drop away. Just let it go down into the ground, and then wait and see where that quiet spot sits with you. And 9 out of 10 times, it'll be in one or two places that I have noticed. And that'll be either in our heart center, which sits here, or in our gratitude center. And when you find that, you always have to thank the animal and that for helping you. But that is one of the easiest ways to find that space. And then you can just learn to practice your breathing, and usually a count of 5s when you breathe in for 5 counts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you find your rhythm while you're doing that. You've got your hands on the horse, you and the horse. Your energies are mingling, and you are starting to find more of a even playing field where there are hiccups between the two of you, and you might actually feel like the horse that you're with gently leaning in towards you. And that is one way you can find that quiet space you need when you're with your horse. Now, that is when we're in a vacuum and we're in this space where we're either quiet in the paddock or quiet in the stable. But where is it when horse is having a tanty today? That happens. We have tanties, they have tanties, right? Then you've got to be the baseline for the horse.
Yeah.
And that can be a little tricky too. But if you just breathe, and once you've learnt to do that breathing thing with them, it's not about your breath and their breath syncing together. It's about the energy and the understanding that you come to, because the horses work as that look through us like an X-ray. And that is how they assess our emotions. Now, if we're going to the paddock and we're completely stressed and we have no tools to work with, and we've just got to work on quietening ourselves, that is very difficult. I've known people who, in my mind, should never have horses, not because they can't emotionally control themselves, but because they have a very cruel streak, and that is something that is always their very first thing to go to. And they come there with that purpose. Yeah. But when you have had a really hard, stressful day, which is why we love this group, because we all love our horses and we want to be better for them. But when we've had a hard day, it can be so hard to find that spot, that space. And they're the days where you sit and go, is it worth working with my horse today?
Yeah.
Is it worth me putting a halter and the lead? And for me, to be honest, my happy place and my relaxing place is on their back. So I can be in the foulest mood you can find, But you put me on the back of one of my horses, and I it doesn't have to be, nothing happens. I just sort of go into who I'm supposed to be with them.
Yeah.
But as most people who know me think I'm a freak of nature, so that could be just a me thing. But when you're like that, but when you're at that space and you're not sure, take 5 minutes to sit down in the yard or sit at your horse. I mean, I used to sit with my back pressed up against my horses like this on their front legs, or lean into them. And if you can't find that space that quietens you, then that's the day you turn and say, I don't think I should be working with you today. Let's just love each other.
Yes.
And that is the key, because that is where the heart center is the bridge. And that is all about that unconditional love. And when we're in that space, we need to find that again.
Yeah.
It's not like a magic formula, and aromatherapy can help, which we will get to later.
Yeah.
But it's a level of acceptance of who you are and who your horse is, and understanding both of your boundaries, which we didn't talk about.
Yeah, we haven't talked about boundaries yet.
No. So it's that level that we have to find and accept. This is what it is.
One of the things that I have started teaching my students, if they're there for a lesson and I can't send them home because they're in a bad mood, is to just stand and breathe the horse in and smell the horse. And so the breathing of the horse in and the smelling the horse, I think helps with the same like level of connection. With, breathing helps you get into that state of calm relaxation. But then I think also smelling the horse in helps with that connection. And do you have something to add there, Joe?
No, I was just thinking you were thinking the same thing I was thinking, then I was trying not to laugh.
I think that goes a really long way to helping us if we're down there. And it doesn't mean that you have to ride, like we're not saying like force yourself into the saddle, but that is another way that you can practice being with your horse as well. So Heather has said the way you were talking about energy with King reminds her of her horse Justice. She gets really fidgety when I don't go into a training session with a to-do list in my head. It's like she doesn't know how to relax when I'm working with her. She has a handful of times, but it's not something she's eager to do or confident with. Do you need me to repeat that?
No. That is knowing what's expected of her, because that is her default system.
Yeah.
So depending on her age and what she's been through, because I don't know Justice very well, but depending on what she's been through, then it's one of those things that you say, okay, I'm coming out there now, because they understand our energy and what we're thinking and feeling. I'm coming out there, I'm going to catch you. I think we might have a brush today and see how we go from there. And slowly work it up, but don't do it all the time so you're heavy in your head. Try to slow it down and bring it down to a different space and make it a little softer each time, and just see how she reacts.
For a lot of our horses, we are the biggest stress in their lives. And depending on their experiences, they can find it a really uncomfortable place to relax as well. They don't always, a lot of them don't feel safe to relax around us. And that isn't necessarily us. It is potentially the experiences they've had before we've seen them, which it is in King's case. It was the experiences he had before I got him. So that's why we have our trainings on this relaxation with our horses and rewarding them for being relaxed around us before we bring them up into like more of a working state, a working energy where we ask for them to concentrate. But for a lot of the horses that have experienced, you have a job to do, go do your job, and then they do well at it, that's their safe place with people, is if they know what's expected of them and they can go do their job, the job goes well, they get turned out, they get fed, that can go a long way to building that trust with the horse and having them kind of settle in with us. But again, it's a different place to like that true relaxation that we can get once our horse feels safe to relax around us.
Yep. And the question that just sort of like flooded through my head was, it also is when we're not being with that particular person that we've had experiences before, it was what happened to us when we didn't do what we were told.
Yes. That's,
yeah. So sometimes, like as we were saying with King, he needed to know what was expected of him beforehand. And this seems to be the case, and I don't know Justice's history, but she may be trained the way where she needs to know what's coming her way first. And just the only thing that you can do with that is try to soften it so she gets the level of understanding that it's not always something that is going to come from a place of the mind. There's going to be, it can be a process, not just for us, but for them too. If you think about the fact, the trauma that you've been through, and you're going in your heart space and, oh my God, and a horse that's been through it, that's like, no, my brain has to be switched on to be a horse. To go into that space can be uncomfortable for them too. So it's got to be a slow process for them, because they can melt down a lot easier than us.
Yeah.
My Kellyanne is naturally high strung, a very, very high strung horse. Also very protective, and people tried to steal her when she was about 5 or 6, because I was offered $10,000 for her. And her fear of being taken away from me, floats were the root of all evil. And I could sit there and be relaxed with her in a float, but I have my own fear of traveling, so that never helped her very much.
Yeah.
So do you see where it didn't matter there how relaxed I tried to become? I had my underlying level of fear that, no, this thing is bad underneath it all. I can feel it in you. I don't want to go near that. Although if I hung a bale of hay off it, she would stand there and eat. But going in the, in the thing was a different story. So you have to take into consideration past things and how that horse likes to be approached. Kellyanne, I could run up and jump on her head, and she'd just stand there and go, oh my God, she's jumping on me again. Shelley, I couldn't walk when I taught her to lead, and I was on crutches teaching her to lead, and she got whopped in the legs, and she was only a bubba a couple of times with the crutches, and she was like, oh yeah. Because they knew it wasn't from a space of, you're not doing it right, whack.
Yeah.
And that's where some of these things come into play for some of them. They're like, well, what is the repercussion if I don't know what I'm here to do? And if you haven't given me a clear set of rules, I don't know what your rules are. And that could be very well the issue. So find her way and do it in a way that makes you feel more comfortable in yourself, that allows you to be who you truly are on that authentic human level. So if you're like me and you don't like rules and regulations very much, and you like to fly by the seat of your pants, it can be problematic. And if I had to approach my horses with X, Y, and Z, it would have to be done in a way that helped support them and didn't make me feel uptight. And that is where you need to learn the difference, is what makes you feel uptight, and where is uptight in your body? Is it in your stomach area, in your back? Do your shoulders just sort of like go hard? Does your spine go straight? and then find what part that is in your body and relax that part of your body as you're going to do it with your list.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yes. Being aware of where you're holding physical tension in your body and breathing into that and relaxing is really beneficial for the horse, because we don't have that awareness most of the time. We don't notice our intentions, but our horses see it. They see it all over our face. And the people that know us see it as well, and even the people that don't know us. Sometimes the facial expressions and the body languages are so offensive to the people that don't know us that they don't even talk to us. AKA this resting bitch face right here.
And I don't see you as having resting bitch face. I just see my friend Katie.
It's mostly when I'm working. When I'm in work mode, I'm considered incredibly unapproachable and people are terrified of me. Because they're really worried that I'm a grumpy old asshat. Which probably when I'm working I am. I'm sorry, guys. But I got things to do, man.
I just had a huge Tyrannosaurus Rex come up and eat a student.
You will treat that horse with respect. You will have hands they can trust, and you will hold yourself well. You will not hurt my horse.
Well, okay, see, then I must have resting bitch face or just be a bitch completely, because I taught my cousin to ride and she was too heavy on her hands and I rode past her and went whack across her knuckles. I told her, I said, take your hands off his mouth. No, she just kept like this on his, and I just went whack. You can't ride with reins anymore.
Yeah,
you don't deserve reins.
I haven't hit any of my students yet. I just give them the face and they know, oh, hands out of the horse's mouth.
See, yeah, no, I like the corporal punishment when it comes to hurting my
horse. So Heather has said that Justice is off track 11 years old, raced until 2016. She doesn't love being groomed, and she thinks that she has triggers associated with pressure and anxiety from racing, but she's very eager to please. So my interpretation is that the eager to please is who she is as her, like, when we start, like what we've talked about with belief systems and emotions, when we start stripping back these defense mechanisms that have come up within our horses and ourselves to cope with these uncomfortable emotions, we start stripping them back, and the true personality blossoms. The eager to please, sensitive, curious, intelligent horse is who I think she is. And then the little like anxiety quirks and whatnot are the things that we'll have like layered in on top as a defense mechanism for coping with the industry. And this is one of the things that we teach about in our membership is a lot of our horses, we don't get them as babies. We get them after the damage is done, and we have to kind of like find who they are before humans happen to them. And so we call this seeking a secure attachment with our horses. And some of our students find that the horse completely changes in nature because of all of these behavioral things that have been layered on as a way of dealing with people. You never really know who that horse is if all we're seeing is their defense mechanisms for self-preservation, whether it's emotional or physical or mental self-preservation, that isn't who your horse truly is. Who your horse truly is when we take all of those defense mechanisms away and build up their confidence in themselves. You have any input on that one, Jane?
Okay, so usually with our horses and being eager to please, they also want us to find those little nuggets in ourselves. So when we're helping them pull back the layers, we're effectively pulling them back on ourselves as well. So while we're doing that, we're learning, and in a lot of times we have to be okay, I'm going to just use this term, adult it, and be the adult and be the leader. Because, God, who wants to be the adult? Seriously. But that is what we need to do. And that gives us that secure place. And going back to that spot, have you ever watched a mare with a foal? I mean, for me, it is the most beautiful and amazing relationship, and they have the most amazing rapport with their babies. It can come back to finding that kind of connection, which is probably why Kellyanne treated me like her foal. You know, but that is it. It's about us then having to step up and be the leader and let them know, well, while we're in this space of learning, I've got your back. You're safe to be who you are naturally with me. And that comes with you being in a space that allows them to do it.
Yeah.
Finding that spot in yourself.
Yeah. So what we were talking about before about, that person telling us that maybe we're not smart and it's like, it's really hit, that creates this whole version of yourself that you become, that you didn't have the potential to be until you thought that about yourself. And so sometimes like the words and the experiences, they hit really hard and they create a thought about yourself, and that thought kind of goes with you for the rest of your life. And as an adult, you can like look back on that and say, well, that's really not true. Like that's completely unproductive to everything I'm trying to do with my life now. And that's what we call self-limiting beliefs. And so our horses can have that same experience. So, a lot of these thoughts and emotions are set up like in our baby years, baby through to child through to youths. And then we're taking that into the world and experimenting with it with our interactions with others. Not very many of our horses get a good start to life. They don't get that relationship with their mother to establish these positive interactions, these emotional bonds, find a way to balance themselves emotionally. They get weaned. If you're in the racing industry, they get stabled 24/7, only run like at that 1 hour point. If they're in the competition arena, I read a post recently about a show jumper who refuses to turn her horse out because she's worried about them injuring themselves in the paddock. So her horse is being stabled unless she's riding them. These are not creating healthy emotions in our horses. They're not creating healthy social engagements. They're not allowing your horse to be the best version of themselves, because they're not. So the emotions are chemicals, and those chemicals are released so that our horse learns how to, like if they were in the wild, how do they integrate for each other's safety and protection. And so they still have all of these chemicals that show them how to integrate into a herd and into their world and with safety coursing through their body, without the experiences to like move the chemicals appropriately. So if they're feeling a really, really strong desire to connect with other horses for safety, and they're stabled or paddocked alone or whatnot, then those emotions are going to create tension and anxiety because they can't have their needs physically met. And then we can't know what a horse is thinking, but they most likely start thinking, I am not safe, I cannot relax. And then we go
Their
into
cortisol levels go.
cortisol, like they have all of their hormones spike. We're now dealing with stress. And then we're going to go into that environment and ask them to work and to train and through pressure and forcing them into behaviors that we want so that we can show them. And so then, you've got emotional imbalance on top of emotional imbalance on top of emotional imbalance on top of emotional imbalance. We've got feelings of lack of safety, lack of relaxation. And so they're in their stress response and they're just reacting to their environment to the best of their ability for what they think that of as being safe. Plus, they're the fact that they're a horse and we cannot actually have this conversation with them to like tell them what we're trying to do with them and why they're supposed to be out competing for us and, me out to compete for our egos.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is where like our horse adapts to its environment and its experiences, but that doesn't mean that that adaptation is positive to their mental, physical, and emotional health. And then that's where we see the issues with their behavior, and all of those other things that like the big behaviors, the dangerous behaviors, all of those kinds of things. And so that's what that process of emotional conditioning is trying to do, is strip back those experiences and kind of try and reshape a more positive experience with them where they feel relaxed and connected within their environment, within their herd, within their relationship with us, and within themselves.
Again, you have it's remembering that they're a horse as well, that they have to be a horse first and foremost. As much as it kills us at times to walk out and go, oh no, God, they've got another cut. But because like that's one of the hardest things to deal with is when they're not well. I mean, I can remember not sleeping so I could make sure that they were okay, which isn't good for me. But when you've got a horse in its environment that's not its natural environment, the chemical buildup goes into not just like throughout their bloodstream, it's in their muscles. So you add that pressure to the pressure we apply, which increases their sensitivity to pressure. And horses feel a fly land on them. All you need to do is like do this on their side and you'll get them to skedoot around. There's not a great deal that we need to do to keep them moving. So there's that, and then there's the unhealthy aspect of what it does to them on the chemicals being released in their body does to them. So it's about then you've got to go back to help them learning how to be a horse and understand that it's okay to kick up their heels.
Yeah.
And sometimes what we really need is that tiny little moment to play with our horse, for them to play as a horse. Kelly and I used to play tag. When we were kids, I would run up and go, slap her on the bum and go, you're it, and run. And she would squeal and like twist after me and run after me and then put her nose on my back and make this little squeal thing and then run off, and I would run after her. And the only time I was never allowed to play the game was once I lost use of my legs and running was an issue, but it was her and I doing a game that horses played in the paddock.
Yeah.
So we have to also be in their headspace too, that they are horses and you have to respect that and accept that, because you're just going to cause them more harm. So acceptance of everything that we've talked about is a huge issue. I mean, it's not above the feeling aspect, but if you can you accepted King as he was, which gave King the confidence to understand. And was it Heather with Justice?
Yeah.
she accepts justice for who justice is, and she's willing to give justice this bit that she needs and bring it from a space of love. And this will slowly help justice to come out of herself and be a little bit more, oh, we're going to do this today. Okay, I know what's going on. You're not approaching me with an empty mind, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
So that is it. And when you bring in other tools to work with, it can help ease the chemical imbalances for both horse and rider.
Yeah, which is also where
Breathing
helps.
Yes, breathing is a great technique for you to reconnect. The biggest thing that we as humans can do for our horses, honestly, is to connect to ourselves and understand ourselves. If we can do that, then we can connect more deeply with them and help them through what they need. And they will do the same for us. I've been working with a lady with her horse, and her horse takes care of her. She's well trained, she takes care of her. But the lady was still scared. And what she needed to do was to understand that the horse needed her to step up and be a bit of a leader for her, you know? And when she needed the horse to take the reins over and lead, the horse did it without missing a beat. And she was so excited now that she rides the horse like she wasn't riding her very much at all before. Now she goes out, she goes on rides every other day, spends the time with her in the paddock, and that is a horse that was trained to just work.
Yeah.
And her job with this particular human was to teach this human that there are times she needed to stand up and be the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And that is sometimes where we need to actually look at ourselves a bit more, look at our expectations on our horses and what we want to give. Now, if we're working with a tool like aromatherapy, whether you're we're all animals, but when we breathe in the molecules and they go up our nostrils, the nose hairs we have are called cilia. And then the information goes into our brain. And this works on the chemical responses and the receptor cells in our brain as to what chemicals to release. So if we're under moments of stress, most people are going, oh my God, I'm going to go get the lavender, right? But just using straight lavender can not only just restore and slow the system down, but it can slow it down too much. So you want to be able to have that relaxed state, but also that state where you're aware of your surroundings and what you're doing and your focus. Because if you lose your focus with a horse, no matter how good you are, if you drop your focus, you're screwed. And that is the thing of it. So even when you're in yourself and you have to be 100% aware of your surroundings and your horse. Everyone used to think I was a mental case because I would sit out in the paddock and they'd be walking around me and I'd be leaning against Crystal in the paddock with newborn foals, or I'd be sleeping with a newborn foal, but I was aware of where they were. And that is another thing that we need to consider is our level of awareness. And the moment we're not aware, you're going to get some of them who have been through crap that's going to take advantage of it. And King and Justice need to know that their humans are aware of what's going on and have a plan for them because they don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
As to where Fitty is a little, I think Fitty, you know, given half a chance would be a hippie. Yeah. No offense. I love my hippie. My girl loves ylang ylang and patchouli, so I'm okay with hippies. But if Biddy could do that love, peace, and mung beans thing, you know, and say, I've had enough now. I want to go and sit in the sun with my hooves on my stifles and just sit there and meditate and watch the world drift by. You don't have to have a thought in your head. That's all good. But he also has something else where he's got this entire fear, and it is a fear for Fitty, that someone's going to get on him and they're going to get hurt. And he's also had this deep craving for love that wasn't reciprocated. So if you're someone who's had your heart and you've loved somebody and you've offered them their heart and they've thrown it in the dirt, you're going to be unwilling to love, but you're going to need that love to help you pull out of it.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's
So
also one of those things that you have to understand the history of both the person and the horse. And in my experience, they have been so closely linked that you sit there and go, huh. And you'll find two people with partners, they'll find that there are so many little bits and pieces that are pretty much similar to their own experiences.
And that was one of the big things that I had to figure out with Fiddy. He doesn't like being touched. He doesn't really like, he probably does like being touched, but only when I'm in the right mood. But mostly he doesn't like being touched. He doesn't like being groomed. And when we give Fiddy choices so he can choose between the two brushes, he nudges my chest and he chooses me. But one of the things that, like when we talk about finding what your horse's love language is and how to connect with their unique personality, motivating and rewarding Fiddy through patting and scratching only works if he's super itchy because he's been attacked by midgies. What Fiddy likes to do is he likes to just stand and chill. And if we're like really close, like we've gotten now, he'll lick my hand. And one of the other things that he likes me to do is actually pull his tongue a little bit. So I think that there might be like a physical release in his hyoid or something at the same time. But I'll hold his tongue and he'll like pull his tongue through my hand. And that's his like emotional rebalance when we're training. So Fiddy's thing is that he will get really frustrated if I'm repeating things too many times or if he doesn't understand the answer and there isn't like a clear reward. And he also gets really bored really quickly. So we have to frequently we now have that conversation happening where he can signal to me, we need to stop. We need to do that little emotional check-in where he can just relax. And the way he chooses to relax is by me holding his tongue as he pulls it through my hand and stands and relaxes.
Volume's gone, Katie. And it doesn't look like it's on mute. Now it's on mute.
I think. Have
okay,
I got
try
it now?
now. Ah, yay!
So he will tell me when he needs that that like stop to happen, and then he will tell me when he's ready for his reward earning behaviors, and that is when I have the best cooperation with him. And Jane will know how difficult it was for me to get to that place, because initially we would just get frustrated with each other. He'd get frustrated with me and his angst would build, and I'd get frustrated with him and I'd storm out. And then I'd message Jane and be like, Jane, help. So finding your horse's unique way of emotional self-regulation, reconnection, what they need to feel good about themselves, how they need you to support them through that unpacking process. Like you hear me say all the time, cue training is the easy part. It's all of this emotional stuff that's the hard part. And a lot of the emotional stuff is the hard part because it's the hard part for us first. We can't guide our horses emotionally through stressful experiences if we're not very good at doing it for ourselves either. And for ourselves, it's normally a journey of finding where that emotion comes from and that underlying belief that triggers it, and that kind of like shows up during periods of stress and frustration. So for me, my trigger is time pressure. as soon as I feel like I don't have enough time, which I constantly, but I'm always the one that's making myself not have enough time as well. So I'm like, I can fit all of these things into a day. And then I go into the day and I go, oh crap, I have all of these things to do.
Now, who was it who told me once to narrow down my list of my to-dos on a day? I'm just trying to remember who that wise person was. Who was it?
Who could it be? It wouldn't be somebody
Oh, it wouldn't be somebody I'm talking to right now. I mean, God.
It wouldn't be somebody preaching and then not following her words at all.
No.
That is a surefire way for me to get that resting bitch face on and tight through my body and all of those things that my partner hates, my son hates, my horses hate, my staff hate, my students hate.
And you do see there's a pattern there. See the pattern?
Yeah.
There's a pattern. And they're the things that you need to look for.
Yeah. I create the time pressure. I create my own frustration. I then react to the situation that I've created through frustration. And then everybody else has to deal with this.
Pressure cooker Katie.
Yeah.
Oh, that should be your gangster name, Pressure Cooker Katie.
Yes. Just waiting for the explosion.
So yeah, and you need to understand what it is that triggers you. For me, seriously, dumb questions. And me having to repeat myself more than 3 times. You've got me to the third repeat on something. I'm sort of like, how many times do I have to tell you this? You know?
Yes.
But, like, you need to understand your triggers and understand how they physically affect you so you can work through them. But you also need to understand, because you've got to remember, even though your horse will reflect things to you, your horse is their own person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Their own horse.
Right? And they will, their own horse, their own horseness, and they will have their own triggers. So with justice, with pressure, and with Biddy, with being touched and pressured, you would find that there are worse places that would hurt them more. So with Biddy, I kind of get a little bit around the wither area, like in where the muscle starts, where the saddle would sit going down in the Western saddle, it's the fender. And I can't remember it in English now.
And
but you all know what I mean.
Every time I go to Mount him, if you get the roaching of the back, like he's going to buck. And you have to warm them up out of it.
You know that there is actually an acupressure point that, so this is from my vet when he did some work with Kel, and he showed me where to work. And to be honest, I'm terrified of hurting them more than anything. Even when I massage, Katie can tell you I'm one of those ones, does that hurt? Because for me, massage isn't meant to hurt. It's supposed to unravel things, release things, and give you a deep sense of relaxation, right? So I have this fear of sticking needles in my horses or anything, and my vet thinks I'd be really good at acupuncture. But what I did after he did his initial one, I made an aromatherapy product, and I would massage the points. And those points where he is sorest, when you go to, and he roaches and starts to round his back over, there are actually pressure points in there that are affecting, which you would know because you know a lot about the pressure points. And they tend to need a bit of releasing. And if that's his case, then my thing is that something's been done to his spine.
He did put his leg down the rabbit hole, if you remember. And he put his back out pretty bad. To, put his hips out.
Wasn't a T6 too? Didn't he do something to his T6? Or one of the ones in his wither? Or am I confusing him with another horse? Because I've got another horse that's got a nasty thing where She was a baby when they trained her, and it was a big man who rode her. And in the middle of her wither, you know how the wither is nice and rounded and even? Her wither goes like that. And she can't stand being ridden.
Yeah.
Poor little
I
bubba.
think it is a really big one because the shoulders are such a vulnerable area for the horses. And that's where they carry most of our weight. Like that's the whole purpose of us trying to get engagement and trying to transfer the weight into the hindquarters is to alleviate that pressure that we're putting on their chest and their shoulders. There's only muscles kind of really supporting that area. So if we're not putting the appropriate conditioning into the horses to actually carry our weight in the first place, then when we sit on it, them like that puts a lot of strain on a very vulnerable area. Plus, add to that, if you're working a horse in a frame before they're ready by just flexing them away at the third vertebrae and getting them to tuck their nose behind the bit instead of actually like engage their sling muscles and open out their chest and their shoulders to carry us and then come up through their neck as true self-carriage should happen, then we're hyperextending the muscles through that area and actually making it weaker where we're asking them to hold us
and
rather
then you're
than
putting pressure on the bone.
And then putting pressure on their spine and whatnot. So I think something that has come up twice in our little chat over here that I think is super appropriate because I think lots of people feel this. So Heather has said her underlying belief would be that I'm not good enough. And Sally has said the same thing where she agrees with Heather. When it comes to riding, I feel like I'm not good enough. When on the ground, I'm feeling much more confident, but in the saddle, I don't feel like I'm good enough. And it's something that I hear all the time. Something that a lot of my students will say to me is that I don't feel good enough for my horse. I feel like I should find them a better owner. A better rider, not necessarily a better owner. Some of them feel very competent at owning, but they're like feeling uncomfortable that their handling or training or ridden skills are lacking.
Okay, so it's a level of confidence in their own ability to ride.
Yeah.
Not a level of confidence in the fact that I'm scared my horse is going to put its head down and buck me off or something like that. More about
a little bit of that, but I do think that for a lot of my students, it's confidence that they're doing a good enough job for their horse.
Okay, so then you want to
by being with them is a common one, that you can't get them to their true potential, that they need a better trainer. Those kinds of things come up a lot.
Okay, well, something I was told when I was really sick, right? And I'm glad that I stuck to it was that, and I was told when I was a kid too by another veterinarian Richard, who was my mentor when I was a kid. My mum said to me when I was going to give my horses up, there is no one who could love or understand them better than you. Richard used to tell me there was no one who could understand your horse better than you. When you have a relationship on the back of a horse, right? It's different from the relationship you have on the ground with a horse. The dynamics change because you are more vulnerable on their back.
Yep.
This reduces your confidence because you are effectively trusting this 500 to 700 kilogram, depending on what horse you're riding.
Yeah.
That is beneath you, that you're sitting there, you're just perched on its back, gripping with your legs, right? And if you're lucky, you might have something to grab onto with the saddle or the mane, but it's not foolproof. You know, that changes the dynamic of the relationship. This is where you work on your level of confidence in yourself, in your ability, your level of trust in yourself to deliver, but the level of trust and confidence you have in your horse. the dynamics from the ground are completely different. To be honest, I'm happier and safer on their back, at least, and we've already established I'm a little bit of a weirdo, than on their ground. But I'm barely 5 foot and I handle horses that are over 15 two hands high, you know? So, like my my horse comes up to the middle of his belly, you know, he's like stands there and he can look over her back and check her from the top. So, my thing is, I do what's around the belly area that I can see and make sure is right. And he tells me what's going on above it where I can't see properly and I need that extra bit of thing. But that comes from the one thing that when I say this, you can't forget is you have to remember to have your feelings intact and understand your feelings. But you've got to go into your confidence center, and everybody's like, oh, my confidence center would be fine, which is just your solar plex area. Most of the time, no, it's not, because when you've had all these things thrown at you from a young age and you're like, I don't know if I can do this, I don't know if I'm good enough, that is your confidence saying to you, and you saying to yourself, I've had this told to me that I'm not good enough to do it, you know? And you have to build on that and work on that aspect of the emotional relationship, because it is, even though it's confidence and it's more of a masculine skill, it's considered, you need to work on that as well. So
when Jane tells you you need to work on something, you don't go, oh, Jane, I can already do that. Like I do to you all the time. When you tell me, Katie, you need to work on being open from your heart, I'm like, Jane, I'm so sick of being open with my heart. My heart that is generally where the work needs to happen.
mm-hmm. So for Sally and Heather, in this respect, it is learning to trust yourself and have the confidence in yourself, and the confidence and the, okay, I can be a bit hard on myself with this, which I got in trouble with one of my vets over. And you notice most of my time, I don't have many other horse people that I'm around, because it just usually makes me sit there and go, but why are you so hard? Why do you think this? Why are you thinking that? I'm like, I'm not looking through rose-colored glasses. And the best thing with Kelly's main vet was he never let me look through rose-colored glasses. He was one of those rare ones that I have very high standards. His standards, like he's 7 feet tall, so his standards are higher than mine, you know? And he would have high standards, and that would make me reach his standards, which built my level of trust and confidence. It's a matter of you saying, okay, I have this standard. Can I reach this standard and trust myself to have this standard and be with it? Do I have the trust and the confidence in myself and the fortitude to continue forward with what I am seeking to do? And they're questions that you need to put to yourself before you even start.
So
am I willing?
Sorry, continue.
Am I willing to put myself in this position where I'm going to, in any sense, think of be bare naked and expose myself and accept that part of me that I'm trying to learn and improve, and work on my level of confidence with my horse and my ability to make my horse the best that she or he can be, because I know when I'm doing that, I'm actually being the best I can be.
It's a journey.
Find that. It's a big journey.
So one of the things that I find really helpful, because I think I do struggle to connect emotionally sometimes, is remembering a time and a situation where I have experienced that feeling before. So my check-in for if I am in a place of love or not is Trin, because Trin and I practiced unconditional love when I first got Trin, and I practiced it on her. So she was
as I said, Trin was the key.
Yeah. She was my first experience of like what it feels like to come from a place of loving something unconditionally. And so she is how I like cue that emotion into my body. So if I'm like, okay, what does it feel like when I feel love for Trin? I'm like, can breathe into it, try and find that feeling in my body. And when I go there, like my face changes, my body changes, I can feel the tension go out of my face, I can feel the tension go out of my body. And that's the place that I need to be in if I'm going to go down to Fiddy, and I've got to like translate that feeling for Trin to Fiddy if he is going to work with me on that day. So my recommendation for if you're struggling with confidence is finding a time that something happened and you felt really confident in yourself. And that's a big one. Hey, like, you get into trouble for feeling proud of yourself. Like, people tell you, you know, not to behave a certain way that you do when you're proud of yourself, because it's thought of as being egotistical and you know, that kind of thing. So I think that being proud is a very difficult balancing act. And you know, one time that I can think of that really shattered my confidence was in school. I used to go and compete, and you know, when you go to hack shows, you get like, you know, 10 to 15 ribbons because you do so many classes. And I, you know, went and did my inter-school show day with the hack show with my horse. And I came to school the next day, and my friend asked how I went. And I was like, well, I got first in this and first in that, I got second in that, I got first in that. And she was like, oh, be quiet, Katie, like, don't be such a show off. And so, you know, that's a situation where I was proud of myself because, you know, we all know how much work goes into training our horses. We all know how much we sacrifice to progress with our horses. So
don't forget training yourself.
Training ourselves. So that is definitely one of those times that we were talking about where that hit really hard, and that sat with me. And so after that, I would never share how I went at a show. I'd be like, yeah, we went okay. And that was a time that, you know, I then have a self-limiting belief about sharing when I do well and being proud of myself and feeling confident in myself. And so then you have to practice that feeling. Like, you have to go back to a time before that happened where you felt the purity of that confidence, and that you might not even have somewhere to go back to. Like, you might need to practice that for yourself and try and recreate that for yourself. You can't let your environment or wait for your environment to create your emotional state, because sometimes that environmental state is just not going to happen for you. You've got to try and find those emotions that you want to feel in each and every experience that you have. Otherwise, you're going to end up with resting bitch face all the time. Like I have.
Yeah. And that is something that you need to be able to draw. And the same with love. Like, for me, in the last few months, like the last few months have been really hard for me. But the thing that I have learnt the most is that all of my teachers that have taught me the power of love and the power of confidence have 4 legs.
Yeah, 100%.
Seriously. From 5 days of age, my parents introduced me to their breeding German Shepherds, and their female mothered me. And I've struggled with relationships, like human to human relationships, forever. And I have got, like, you know what I'm like Katie. I mean, you know, and I'm open and honest, but I also have this thing, like, I will not sit there and judge you for who you are. If you ask me to help you, then I will help you. But I'm also someone who says, now, wait a minute, no, just because of this, this, and this doesn't mean I have to do that. You know, I don't have to be who you want me to be. And I have this ability, which I also know comes from the animals. It's called standing in your feminine power. It's not the bully bitch that you come across. It is probably almost like Katie's resting bitch face in some ways, where she's digging into her feminine energy, and it is more powerful, but it's not to the point where it's going to shatter. It's that thing where you've gone far enough, back up a few paces right now, or I'm going to unleash holy hell upon your head. It's that preemptive, right? And that is something that I have learned from all the animals I have been around. And I did not know that until I watched something in one of the animal communication things that I'm in. And it was about how wolves train each other, how the mother wolf trains the pup to understand, and how they use energy. And I realized that's what I did. And all of my stuff has come from learning from animals. The confidence, my level of unconditional love is from animals. And it is so hard to translate that to humans. Most humans think you're an absolute pushover, and that knocks your confidence for a six.
Yep.
You know, or that you're just a bitch, or you're too confident. How dare you get up on a horse you don't know and ride it after you've been through so much crap with your body? Well, I do, and I did, you know, and I'm not sorry for it, because that is what I've been trained by the animals. So if you're struggling with that level of confidence as well, look to them and try to see yourself through their eyes. Because I can tell you now, there is no one in this world who is going to see you more pure than your pet. No one. They love you on a level that goes beyond you could possibly imagine.
So if this is something that I think that you are going to be able to relate to, if your experience of that emotion has happened prior to a trauma, physical or emotional. So, for instance, a physical trauma that's done enough damage to your body that you can't actually function the way that you did beforehand. So you have lost that confidence in yourself because you're not the person that you were before. Or like an emotional trauma that's had that same experience with you. So, you know, it's changed who you are as a person. How do you find that emotion again?
That differs for everyone. The time, but the duration it takes differs for everyone, because what most people don't realize with this, you're actually going to be grieving the part of yourself that's been damaged. And it's a matter of when you figure that out and understand it and accept that you're not going to be the same again, right? Which is really hard. And we have tantrums. Even I have tantrums. Oh my God, do I ever have tantrums? And I have specific friends that deal with my tantrums for specific things, you know? But for me personally, it's looking at the way my animals respond to me. It is the empathy that they give me when I need it. It is the love that they continue to give. And then tapping into that is probably why it's easier for me to open up to animals than people. They help you to connect back to it, but you have to be ready to do it, and you will never be pushed into it. Your animals will never push you. But when you've had, like for me, when they told me that I was never going to walk again the first time, I actually tried to end it, because I said, you'll never walk, you'll never ride again. And to never ride again, that was like the end for me. And I have spent my entire adult life fighting just to ride horses again, right? But that changes you emotionally, physically, and molecularly too, because the chemistry in you changes as well. If you're going through a physical thing, the physical pain your body's going through at that time. And you have to learn to understand and cope with that. And then find the parts of you that are beautiful. And I'm not talking about the physical part. Like for me, it's always my great hair, you know. You know, but it's like the other things. Do I still have the love of the animals? Do I still have that inside of me? You know, and that's the way that you find that when you've been through emotional trauma, like emotional heartbreak, which there isn't one of us here who can't relate to, and for each of us, we've taken different amounts of time to grieve something and turned around and said, "Here's my Frenchie, fuck love, never going there again."
Yeah.
We've all done it, and we continue to do it whenever we get hurt again. Why do I even bother? Right? But everybody says you go back to when it started, when it was sweet and that, but that triggers the part that hurt. So you go back to that space. For me, again, it was learning how to be safe because I was abused in primary school. I was badly abused in primary school, you know, and it really comes out when I started high school. My teachers said to my parents that I had all the hallmarks of abused kid, right? But it was the strength and the confidence I got through Kellyanne and the other horses that helped me to become who I am. When I couldn't walk, it was focusing on them. So it's like, you know how you have that one thing that is that stable thing you look at that doesn't waver? They're the ones that don't waver. Humans waver, the animals, they don't. And when you're in a space that is really dark, so some people, they call the dark night of the soul,
Yeah.
sort of thing, when you're going through like that really awful thing, the one thing that doesn't move, that always has light that you can focus on, that is where you go. And that is what you look at, even if it is your silly ass 6-month-old kitten throwing one of your hair ties that she's stolen again and throwing it in the air and twisting around like an absolute bizarre bum. That is where it goes from. And it's the same with looking at little kids before they're jaded. Like, oh my God, watching the video of Finn yesterday. And I was like, come on, Finn, crossover. Come to us. Come now. You know? But it's that innocence, that purity, that, oh my God, I so love that sort of thing. Yeah. That is what we need to see to attach to so that we can start our healing. At least that is what I have learned over the years through all the shit I've been through and with all the people that I've helped, you know. So they're the things like it, and perspective. My focus was I'm riding a horse again. And I did not change that perspective at all. And I still now, my perspective is I'm going to ride. I want to ride. And I started taking lessons. I finally found someone who was willing, with everything I've been through, to take lessons with me. He got his mare to let me mount from the wrong side, you know, because I can't use my left leg.
Ongoing physical trauma from your car accident.
Yeah. Yep. And I have complete weakness down the left side of my body. And he said to me, I think that, like, he said, your seat is great, Jane. Your hands are great. The only time that my seat, I actually move out of the saddle is when my left leg gives way. So I have weakness on that side. But that was my focus to keep me going. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It just has to be that one thing that makes you say, I want to do that. And it can be drawing. It can be spending time with your dog. I mean, the best ways to heal, because it affects us in our real emotional cortex, the depression and all of that, to hug our pets, to laugh, watch something that makes you laugh so hard that you're going to pee your pants, you know. Really good belly laugh.
Yeah.
And with the aromatherapy, as well, which I think is an entire separate segment after we've talked all about this
I
stuff.
think we're gonna have to do another session on aromatherapy. We didn't get there that much today.
No, but they're all the things, and it was what helped me through. It's where I started making my own products, where I learned what my skin needed, what I learned what my muscles needed and my bones for the damage that had been done to them, and the infection that I had in my body because it was neglected. It gave me something to focus on. So it's find something, even if, like, I studied accounting. I mean, like, seriously, me, accounting. This is a girl who all she ever wants to do is be outside with horses,
Yeah.
But I studied accounting in the hopes of giving me a future. Did me sweet FA, but I got great grades.
Yeah.
Focus. Find that one thing that and do little by little. You're going to fall on your ass and go, what am I doing? Get back up and do it again. And you'll find each time you fall down with something, like especially a physical thing, you will get back up and it'll be hard, but you'll be better at it.
Well, I think that beautiful words to finish on. It's so true. And if we wanted to, we could keep talking about this for another 3 hours, because this is what our chats generally end up like when we're catching up with it.
Yeah, Mick went to bed on us last time, I think.
He did. So we definitely will be scheduling another chat about essential oils and other things. I'm sure we'll have other topics that come up for us. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jane. If people want to work with you or find you and follow the work that you do with essential oils and animals and the horse-human connection, they can find you on Instagram, Jane at Evoke Aromatics.
Yep.
And on Facebook, on your website.
At Evoke.
Sorry? Yep.
No, just Evoke Aromatics, yeah.
Evoke Aromatics. And we'll put all the links in the show notes for the podcast. And I'm sure even if you want to just send Jane a message or an email or anything, Jane will love to catch up with you and talk more about it, because this is our jam. Hey, Jane.
It is, and every horse and every rider is completely different. The situation behind the reasons for it, and sometimes it's just tiny little nuggets that it's just there for you and you alone.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jane. We will talk again soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
Katie. Thank you, everyone. Bye.